there are still some countries that are struggling here and there to meet the targets that have been set out at a continental level by the Cardiff and Malabo declarations. And also continued population growth, urbanization, changing diets, and climate change are putting pressure on food systems not only to provide more food, but also to make more diverse and nutritious food available and accessible. We have all seen the headlines. Africa's food systems are in the throes of a climate crisis. From devastating droughts in Southern Africa and West Africa to cyclones and flooding in East Africa. Extreme weather is threatening crops and livestock and putting millions of Africans at risk for food insecurity. Already, we are looking at about over 200 million people suffering from chronic undernutrition within the sub-Saharan African region. So the message from the headlines, I believe, is loud and clear. We urgently need to adapt Africa's agriculture and food systems to climate change. And we don't have to do it tomorrow. We need to act now. So at Fanapan, we have taken up the challenge, and our 2016-2023 strategy actually points to us wanting to see a resilient African agriculture and food system that's securing prosperity and health for all. When we look at food system, we are also looking at the people and the institutions that initiate or inhibit change in the system, as well as the economic and technological environment in which these activities take place. Our vision of a resilient African agriculture and food systems is supported by 3 strategic goals. The first goal really captures Fanapan's aspirations within its core business of policy research and convening, with each objective reflecting one of 3 main phases of the policy cycle: the creation stage, implementation, as well as the assessment stage. The second and third goals capture 2 critical issues facing African agriculture and food systems, we believe. The goals reflect 3 dimensions of the challenge. It's looking at the technical or the biophysical aspect, and it's also looking at the behavioral or the social element of the food systems, where it's addressing the level of the individuals, but as well as the institutions. And finally, we are looking at the financial and economic factors of the challenge that also enable the food systems. So we have a portfolio of projects and programs that we are implementing at the sort of regional level, cutting across the different 17 countries where Fanapan is operating. Our programs have been organized into 2 thematic groups, one focusing on nutrition sensitive agriculture, and the second looking at climate smart agriculture. So under the nutrition sensitive agriculture, we are looking at issues of community-led nutrition initiatives. We're looking at upscaling, the adoption of nutrition-sensitive agricultural practices, and we're also looking at improving dietary and health data to help decision-making within the continent. Then when it comes to the climate-smart agriculture thematic thrust, we have a number of projects that are looking at different elements under the climate-smart agriculture thrust. We are looking at sustainable irrigation water management. We are looking at creating an enabling environment to transform agriculture markets. And some of our projects are looking at livestock sector development. And in implementing all our projects, we are working towards building a resilient agriculture and food system in Africa. So we don't do this alone. We are a network of networks, but we also have a number of partners that support our work. Our current portfolio of projects that's being implemented is supported by the partners that you can see reflected here on the screen. But as Dr. McClay indicated, we have also had a successful working partnership with COMESA in the past. So we are always looking for strategic partnerships that will help us deliver on our vision of a resilient agriculture and food system in Africa. Coming back to the session that we are focusing on, I think in the introduction it was mentioned that today we'll be looking at climate change issues. Tomorrow we're looking at nutrition issues. And then on the last day, we'll be looking at capacity building. I want to present to you at this point one of our flagship projects under the climate change cluster of projects, which is the GCRF Africa project that is looking at building agricultural and food system resilience by increasing capacity and advising policy. This project is being implemented in 4 FANPAN member countries and is being implemented in partnership with the University of Leeds, Chatham House, the Met Office, the University of Aberdeen, and we are also working with the FANPAN node hosting institutions across the 4 countries where we are working in Tanzania with the Economic Social Research Foundation, and South Africa with the National Agricultural Marketing Council, in Malawi with CZNet, in Zambia with Agriculture Consultative Forum. Our team is co-developing and carrying out the research needed in each country, from soils, plant and livestock science to meteorology, ecology, and political and social sciences. We explore current farming practices and the alternatives and analyze the results both in current conditions and taking into account the predicted effects of climate change. Our aim really is to translate our research into evidence, evidence into policy, and policy into practice, while at the same time building capacity at local and national level. So under the Africa program, we have grouped our work into sort of 3 broad areas. The first one is looking at policy engagement and de-risking. The second one is looking at pathways to climate-smart agri-food systems. And the last component is looking at capacity building. So under the policy engagement and de-risking theme, in Malawi, we are currently working with colleagues from the Department of Disaster Management Affairs to implement the National Resilience Strategy. We know that in all our countries, we have these sort of national policies that are designed and passed at national level. But sometimes the challenge is, how do you then make it real on the ground? So what we are doing with the Department of Disaster Management Affairs in Malawi is to try and bring down that national strategy at district level in Balaka. In South Africa, we are currently engaging in the process of developing the National Agriculture and Agro-Processing Master Plan. We are making sure that we climate-proof that master plan. In Tanzania, we are working with the Climate Smart Agriculture Alliance to establish the Muheza Learning Alliance. The Learning Alliance really is designed to bring farmers together to be able to share lessons and to be able to share knowledge on climate smart agriculture practices. In Zambia, we are engaging in the National Agriculture Investment Plan process, and we are working with the Ministry of Agriculture in the development of a national edible oils strategy. So moving on to the second theme, that's looking at developing pathways to climate smart agriculture food systems. Our team has developed the Integrated Future Estimator for Emissions and Diets Assessment Framework, which we affectionately refer to as IFEED. And really, with IFEED, we seek to develop integrated evidence for policy pathways that can deliver nutritious food that is low in emission. I'm sure you'll agree with me. It doesn't sound simple, and it's really not simple. It isn't as simple as knowing what to grow and eat, but it also means having an understanding of how agricultural trade operates. So our team has been looking at future food production, where we have been modeling emissions, climate extremes, trade, and nutrition. So the last component of the GCRF Africa program is really focusing at growing research capacity. Training and capacity building is really a central component of the Africa program. We are not only looking at the core Africa team, but we are looking at partners, we are looking at university students, we are looking at developing expertise within the Southern Africa region that will be able to respond to the climate change challenges. So through this theme, we are implementing a number of activities that include looking at partner institutions viability. We're looking at how to build capacity of journalists to be able to engage with climate change and agriculture research and report on it responsibly. We are also fostering partnerships to optimize sustainable intercropping systems in African agriculture. We currently have a sort of pilot project that's being implemented in South Africa. Then we are also looking at developing models to predict aflatoxin risk in Tanzania with collaborators in China. So part of what this component of the Africa program is responsible for is for establishing new partnership, expanding the sort of research themes that we are working on, and also making sure that when the project is finished, we have impact that will extend beyond the lifetime of our current grant. So we have been doing all this work for the past 2 years, and everything has been going well, but then COVID-19 happened. So this year, as we have heard from other speakers, has really been a challenging year, different year, and perhaps a year that has caused us to pause and reflect on our agriculture and food systems. The pandemic has highlighted the fragility of our food systems, and millions more people are hungry and millions more have lost their jobs. Earlier on this year, when the African ministers of agriculture spoke on the impact of COVID-19 on food security and nutrition in Africa, they emphasized that developing sustainable and resilient food systems in Africa can address not only the food security challenges, but various negative influences beyond providing adequate food. So addressing developing our food systems would also have positive impact on, for instance, public health, youth employment, economic development, education, and social well-being in general. So what are we learning from not just implementing Africa as a program, but from the work that FANAPAN is implementing in order to build resilient agriculture food systems? First, I think the key lesson that we are learning is that supportive government policies towards food systems transformation will play a defining role. Here, I think what just needs to be emphasized is that planning for the longer term requires creative solutions. So we now need to think not only short term, but mid term and also long term, and also think about how we can feed Africa's growing population, at the same time deal with the challenges that are presented by climate change. Definitely a post-COVID-19 Africa will be forced to do things differently and invest more in increasing productivity, in enabling policies for private sector and market infrastructure. I think one of the sort of key things that we are seeing is that African agribusinesses must now operate at a much more higher level on the value chain in producing processed goods for the domestic consumption, but also for the export market. The rollout of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, I believe, will be really critical to build well-functioning food systems in Africa, but also to increase trade between African countries, which, if you would have noted in my earlier slide, it's currently sitting at about 8 billion annually. So we would need to see more coordination across borders. We'll definitely need strong leadership at national level, but regional coordination will help us to build back better. Simba, when he was introducing the session, says it's about building better and resilient agriculture food systems. So with the right attention and the strong collaborations between government, agribusinesses, farmers, and different players within the continent, we can build back a post-COVID system that is much, much more resilient. So,
if you can conclude now, Tembi.
as I conclude, thanks, Simba. As I conclude, I just want to say, as FANAPAN, we have accepted the call to action that has been put out by the UN Secretary General to raise awareness and shape global commitments that can transform food systems. So we are taking up the challenge, and as we continue to dialogue, we are looking at how some of our discussions can feed into the Food System Summit that will be coming up next year. I thank you. I think this is my last slide. Please do follow FANAPAN and the different discussions that we'll be having around food systems. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tembi. I think you've given us food for thought, and the questions. For me, the take-home point was the solution is really in three components. I think you can pack everything else into that. We have issues to do with biophysical factors. So this is where we're talking productivity, whether we're talking about introducing better performing crops, drought tolerant, and all sorts of things there, the biological side and the physical nature of these solutions. So this is where maybe we're dealing with things. But there's also a behavioral and, if you like, practice side of things, which calls on us as players in the food systems and agriculture systems to do the right things, all the way from production to consumption. Even as consumers, you have got an important part to play within that food system, to decide what you're going to eat, to be informed about the right things to eat. It's even more critical now under the sort of pandemic conditions and maybe future shocks, that when you don't have enough food, you obviously need wisdom as to how you can make the little food you have balance and actually take you far. Then, of course, there is the economic dimension, which really says, yeah, we can do all these things, but what's the bottom line? So resilience is not just talking biophysical, it's talking about all those three dimensions. So if a system is biophysically resilient, but there are policy issues, there are behavioral issues among the actors, then of course it's not resilient. So we need to look at resilience in a broad sense in that respect. And this is why when you look at the number of panelists and the different things that they're going to address, we have tried to address those three dimensions in one way or the other. So thank you very much, Tembi, for setting the scene for us. We're going to move on now. And of course, one of the critical players in determining whether we are building better and resilient agriculture and food systems are the farmers. We want to know, for instance, how the farmers are responding, or how are they going to respond to climate change from now going forward. And who other than Mr. Ishmael Sunga of the Southern African Confederation of Agricultural Unions to tell us the farmers' side of things. So Mr. Sunga, if you are ready, please, you can go ahead and try and answer that question. As a representative of the farmers, how are you tackling this climate change issue? I'm sure you're very much on the cutting edge of this because you live with it day in, day out. Some of us, we make a living out of talking about climate change, but you make a living about how to manage climate change. Otherwise, we have no food. Mr. Sunga.
Thanks, Simba, for the introduction, and apologies for coming in late. I missed part of the introductory remarks. I joined in when Clay was speaking, and probably I'll start from that because I thought his presentation was provocative in some way, that there are different levels of food security, starting from the household, going up to global. And then he made a very obvious observation it is at the household level, particularly for developing countries in Africa, in particular Southern Africa, perhaps, that the food security is actually compromised. Then you begin to really tie it together with what Tembi just said, that we operate in a system that has got different players, but which is supposed to work towards one common goal. So my own assessment from the two presentations using those two parameters is that the system actually is not delivering to the farmer, particularly who is at the household level and who is particularly smallholder. We ever wondered why there is the smallholder themselves are the most undernourished segments in society, and that perhaps they are even the most poor, if not the poorest in society, and yet they are responsible for the food that we eat and the food that is produced. It's a bit of an embarrassing situation, to say the least, that those that are responsible for feeding us are themselves malnourished, which speaks volumes, in our view as Sakao, about how the system is working. And if I tie it together with the COVID happening, it could actually be a blessing in disguise, because it might give us the opportunity to not build back better, but to build the future that is that delivers better on everyone along the chain, and in a way that is transparent, in a way that is equitable, in a way that the risk is distributed along the entire chain, and in a way that it does not leave some of them, particularly smallholder farmers and households, impoverished. So those will be my first remarks. Before I go to the question that Simba posed about how our farmers responding to climate change, I think there's some fundamentals that we really have to look at in looking at how farmers should or could respond better to climate change. The first point really is about the ABCs, the fundamentals of life, particularly for the smallholder farmers out there, where their circumstances are such that there are no social amenities out there in the hinterland. There's no power, there's no electricity, there's no water, there's no education facilities, there's no entertainment, there's no digital infrastructure, and everything that goes with it. And on top of that, we are actually requesting that they should also be managing things. I think we need to sort out, as a fundamental principle, the backbone infrastructure before we can expect better results from economic and other efforts that we make, before we can begin to think of farmers being better custodians of natural resources, because they're having to deal with the very basics in life. And I think we need to change the approach to really look at ensuring that some of the conditions precedent, by way of just decency, access to decent living, are sorted out. Then we can begin to talk of protection and the stewardship of environment. They may not seem related, but in our view, they are actually part of the problem. So let's have widespread investment in the basic infrastructure, which is not necessarily related to agriculture, but which is related to people. We're talking of farmers as people, and people out there in the hinterland. So that's the first thing. The second thing really is that the issue of resilience and the issue of managing climate change cannot be the farmer's problem alone. When farmers go about their business of producing, they are not doing it for themselves alone. They are doing it for the chain. But guess what happens when drought hits, or climate change happens, or COVID happens? Guess what? The whole chain walks away, and the farmer is left on their own to deal with the problem, as if they are not part of the system. So the point being that we really need to rethink the way that we parcel out different segments of the chain to different people, and begin to think in a more holistic fashion, so that when the thing fails, it is not the farmer who is going to be left with the baby crying in his or her hands, so to speak. Let's look at how we can distribute that risk along the chain, including climate risk, and how there could be innovative ways, police or otherwise, of compensating that loss or that exposure to risk down to the primary producer. It could be by way of sovereign insurance, it could be by way of pricing, but the point being that we need to find innovative ways of ensuring that risk and reward, particularly if we talk about climate risk, that it is not going to be, the job of resilience is not only for the farm, it is for everyone, and everyone must pay towards its building up, and not only the farm. And I'm sure there could be creative ways of doing that. The third point really is about one of the key elements, and I do agree with Fanapan, that policy is one of the instruments that can enable a change to happen at a very fast speed, at very lowest cost, and with very wide impact. Depends on how you engineer policy, and I still think that policy is an area for innovation that enables that it reaches out to all people in the hinterland, in far-flung areas such as smallholder farmers. So we really need to look at how do we use policy as a lever to attract investment in those areas that are traditionally poor and are not able to provide meaningful businesses to investors. It could be by way of tax havens. As an example, if an area did not have the resources that would attract businesses to go there, how do you provide tax havens and maybe import duty taxes to private investors for them to be able to go there? There could be a lot of policy innovations that could actually do that. So let's invest more in policy innovations, not repeating the same, but looking at engineering policy in such a way that it delivers to what we want. The second point related to that in terms of scale and impact is really about digital technology. Information is power, and information is perhaps the best tool one has to manage the risk, climate or otherwise. That if you don't have it, then that is your first defense of risk. Even in the pandemic during COVID, the only hope of managing a panic situation, a crisis situation, was access to information. But this now speaks to investment in digital infrastructure that goes into far-flung areas, and look at also how you can leverage on policy to try and have it enable to reach out all the places in the hinterland. So that's the second point. And the third point really is the job is enormous. We're talking of multitudes of farmers here. We're talking of far-flung areas. We're talking of dangerous terrain. But the point being that to be able to deal with this, we really need to have a partnership approach, because no single organization is going to be able to sort it out. It requires crowding in everyone, and everyone beyond the traditional value chain. It has to form partnerships to try and address the problem in a holistic way, mindful of the fact that when we see people in the rural areas, we want to see them through the lens of a farmer. But perhaps a lot of them are not actually farmers to a large extent. They're just a small portion of them there. So we need to give them a suite of solutions that are not only speaking to increase productivity, that is speaking to the different socio-economic needs that they are confronted with, or the challenge that they're facing. So let's look at providing a bundled solution instead of a climate change solution alone, because that might not be the best thing. We might see it that way ourselves because that's our passion. But as human beings, perhaps they have a broader view, which is actually true of how things should be. Then my final point really is that there is also need to really look at how we can creatively look at not rewarding, but finding a way of pricing the environmental stewardship function that farmers play. and pricing it in such a way that, as an example, a tree becomes much more valuable when it is standing than when it is wood. How do we encourage protection of the environment by paying for that? Maybe paying for carbon sequestration. It might be difficult to measure, yes, but it does not necessarily mean that they're not playing a public good role, for which there should be creative solutions also to ensure that they are not only earning from crops and livestock and other related activities, but they are also earning from the richness they provide to the ecosystem around which they survive and for which they would really want to invest in, because that makes life more bearable for them. I might have not spoken directly to the point of dealing with climate change, but I've spoken to a range of what we think are the fundamentals that needs to be put in place that crowds in everyone, that enables sharing, that enables equity, openness, accountability, and the rest to enable everyone to benefit and to share the loss. I thank you for the opportunity, and over to you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Ishmael. Thought-provoking as usual. I think you've just thrown the ball, curved, I should say, back at everybody else. That look, it's not just the responsibility of the farmers to manage climate change. We all are feeding off this value chain, so we must pay our fair share, and also the farmers must get benefit for their efforts. I'm sure some colleagues will come back and respond to some of those issues. We'll have an opportunity to discuss later on. So let me move on to ask the Director General of the Meteor Madagascar. She said we could call her Niri. I'm not gonna try to pronounce her name, the first name especially. So Niri, if you can go ahead and tell us what the role of meteorology services is in promoting climate resilience of food systems. And I think Ishmael talked about the need for information, the need for data. And I think that's one type of data that farmers and other players need to be able to make the right decisions. So Niri, if you are ready, you can go ahead and share the screen and make your presentation. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le facilitateur. Bonjour ou bonsoir à tous. Donc aujourd'hui, je voudrais présenter le rôle des services météorologiques nationaux dans la promotion de la résilience des systèmes alimentaires et surtout le cas de Météo Madagascar. En fait, le secteur agriculture est un secteur prioritaire au niveau de l'Organisation météorologique mondiale pour la mise en œuvre du cadre mondial pour les services climatologiques. Donc, tous les services météorologiques nationaux sont censés élaborer des produits ou des informations pour le secteur agriculture et sécurité alimentaire. Donc, aujourd'hui, je vais vous présenter les principaux, je dirais, services climatiques que Météo Madagascar offre au secteur agriculture et sécurité alimentaire à Madagascar. En guise d'introduction, je voudrais rappeler qu'en décembre 2019, l'OMM et ses partenaires ont publié le rapport sur l'état des services climatiques pour le secteur agriculture et sécurité alimentaire.
Niri, can I just interrupt? I'm not sure if the translation for the English speakers is working.
It doesn't seem to be working.
So the interpreter is back.
Now.
The interpreter is back online. So if you can just click on interpretation and then click on English, you'll hear that the interpretation should be there now. Thank you.
Okay, can I resume?
Just trying to check with the translators. Are you ready now? Okay.
Yes, the
Yes,
interpretation.
please. You can. We did lose the first minute or so because we didn't pick that translation. But
So,
maybe you can just summarize and then move on.
ok. Donc, comme je disais, donc, ici, je vais présenter le rôle des services. Is it okay? Is interpretation okay now?
Yes, it's
Yes,
fine
it
now.
is. Let's
Okay,
see.
thank you. So, aujourd'hui, je vais présenter donc le rôle des services météorologiques nationaux pour la promotion de la résilience. Donc, on appuie au secteur agriculture et sécurité alimentaire. Et comme je vous ai dit précédemment, le secteur agriculture et sécurité alimentaire est un des secteurs prioritaires pour la mise en œuvre du cadre mondial pour les services climatiques de l'OMM. Donc, tous les services météorologiques nationaux sont censés élaborer et diffuser des informations pour le secteur agriculture et sécurité alimentaire. Donc, aujourd'hui, je vais vous présenter les services offerts par Météo Madagascar pour ce secteur prioritaire de l'OMM. Tout d'abord, je voudrais vous rappeler qu'en 2019, l'OMM et ses partenaires ont publié un rapport sur l'état des services climatiques pour le secteur agriculture et alimentaire. Et ce rapport a mis en exergue que la plupart des populations qui subissent la sécurité alimentaire sont des populations qui habitent des zones qui ont des météorologiques ou climatiques extrêmes assez fréquents. Et le contexte de changement climatique et de réchauffement climatique aidant, si on n'arrive pas à contenir le réchauffement global en dessous de 2 degrés C, le nombre de personnes sous insécurité alimentaire devrait augmenter de 20% par rapport à aujourd'hui. Ça, c'est selon le pape. Donc, il s'avère très urgent maintenant d'une adaptation au climat éclairée par la science et soutenue aussi par les autres partenaires. Donc, pour le cas de Madagascar, parmi nos produits prioritaires, on élabore ce qu'on appelle les perspectives climatiques pour les saisons chaudes et humides. Donc, récemment, on a publié notre perspective climatique pour la saison 2020-2021. Ce sont des informations diffusées, élaborées et diffusées en début de saison, c'est-à-dire au mois d'octobre, et mises à jour mensuellement à partir du mois de novembre. Et ces informations donnent les perspectives pour les précipitations. On donne les probabilités de précipitation par rapport aux valeurs climatologiques normales en début de saison. Donc, pour Madagascar, c'est les mois d'octobre et novembre. Pour le cœur de la saison, décembre, janvier, février. Pour la fin de la saison, mars, avril. Ce sont des saisons qui correspondent à des activités agricoles bien précises pour le cas de Madagascar. Et les précipitations, les probabilités de précipitation sont données par rapport à la normale climatologique. Normale ou supérieure à la normale, inférieure à la normale, etc. Il en est de même pour les températures qui sont données aussi pour la période début de saison, au cœur de la saison et au fin de la saison. Et les informations sont toujours données par rapport à la normale. Donc voilà le produit qui est très attendu par le secteur agricole à chaque début de saison pluvieuse, qui correspond aussi pratiquement à la saison agricole. Puis, sur la base de ces perspectives climatiques saisonnières, on élabore des calendriers culturaux qui sont coproduits avec la FOFIFA, qui est le Centre national de recherche sur l'agriculture, et aussi en collaboration avec le ministère de l'Agriculture, le MAEP. Voici, par exemple, un exemple de calendrier culturel pour la région Analamang, donc la région d'Antananarive, pour une chaîne de valeur qui est l'arachide. Donc, durant toute la saison culturelle, la saison pluvieuse, du mois d'octobre au mois de mai, on donne des calendriers des principales activités agricoles pour chaque décade. Il y a de la préparation du sol jusqu'à la récolte. Malheureusement, ce calendrier est encore statique, malgré le fait que les perspectives climatiques sont mises à jour tous les mois. Mais on espère que plus tard, on aura aussi des calendriers culturaux dynamiques calés avec les mises à jour des prévisions saisonnières mensuelles. Mises à jour mensuelles. Puis, on diffuse aussi des bulletins agrométéorologiques. Ce sont des bulletins mensuels, donc en complément au calendrier culturel, qui donnent un suivi plus détaillé de la saison culturelle en cours, tel que l'état des cultures, la satisfaction des besoins en eau, le suivi de la sécheresse et les perspectives de précipitations. Le bulletin donne également une mise à jour des tendances agrométéorologiques qui est destinée pour la prise de décision à court terme. Voici, par exemple, les informations qu'on peut voir dans notre bulletin agrométéorologique. Il y a la situation pluviométrique donc, du mois passé, les indices de sécheresse du mois passé, les indices de satisfaction des besoins en eau du mois passé, puis les perspectives des précipitations pour le mois à venir. Voilà donc des exemples d'informations contenues dans notre bulletin agrométéorologique mensuel. À part ça, vous savez très bien qu'il nous est difficile d'élaborer des produits ou de diffuser des informations fiables s'il nous manque des informations, des observations. Donc, Météo Madagascar s'est fixé comme objectif d'installer une station agrométéorologique par commune. Il faut savoir qu'à Madagascar, il y a quelques 1600 communes, mais bon, on espère bien y arriver à l'aide avec la coopération avec nos partenaires. Pour le moment, donc, à travers deux projets, notamment le PRCCC et le PACARC. PRCCC, c'est en collaboration avec la GIZ, et PACARC, c'est en collaboration avec le PNUD. Durant l'année 2019 jusqu'à l'année 2020, on a pu installer 35 stations agrométéorologiques dans 35 communes, donc en complément donc, des stations 23 stations synoptiques qui existent déjà, ce qui est déjà pas mal, étant donné que ces stations agrométéorologiques sont installées dans des régions vulnérables en matière de variabilité climatique et de changement climatique, notamment par exemple ici dans la région sud-ouest de Madagascar. Comme il ne s'agit pas tout simplement d'élaborer des produits, mais il faut aussi diffuser ces informations le plus tôt possible. Et il faut qu'ils arrivent aux concernés, donc aux communautés, c'est-à-dire les agriculteurs, les fermiers, le plus tôt possible. Donc, dans le cadre du projet PRADA, financé par la GIZ, et en coopération avec le ministère de l'Agriculture, la FOFIFA et aussi Viamo, on a mis en ligne, donc, en utilisant la téléphonie mobile, les informations, notamment les calendriers culturaux, et puis des conseils agricoles, qui est accessible en langue malgache, en appelant le 321 pour les abonnés d'Airtel ou un autre numéro pour les autres opérateurs. Et il y a 6 appels gratuits par mois pour les abonnés d'Airtel, mais pour les autres, c'est seulement 200 arrières à partir du 7e appel. Donc, les appelants n'ont qu'à composer le 321 sur leur téléphone mobile pour avoir des informations. Tout d'abord, le calendrier culturel est expliqué dans ces messages, mais il y a aussi des conseils agrométéorologiques et agricoles appropriés pour les acteurs, les chaînes de valeur. Et pour le moment, la hotline concerne 5 chaînes de valeur, à savoir donc le riz pluvial sur plateau et riz pluvial sur bas-fond, le maïs, le gingembre, l'arachide et le haricot. Donc, voilà donc les produits actuels que Météo Madagascar dispense pour les secteurs agriculture et sécurité alimentaire. Mais en conclusion, on peut dire donc que les informations climatiques peuvent améliorer les résultats et les avantages de l'agriculture et de la sécurité alimentaire. Les informations climatiques aident aussi à prendre de meilleures décisions et aussi les services climatologiques aident les décisions, à la prise de décision pour les activités courantes en agriculture, telles que quand planter, récolter, irriguer, apporter des fertilisants, mais aussi pour tout ce qui est élevage et les systèmes d'irrigation. Merci beaucoup. Thank you.
Thank you, Neri. Thank you. We obviously had challenges with translation there. I noticed pretty late that it was actually the French channel which was giving English. I lost the English version later on, so I'm not sure if other colleagues had a similar challenge. But yeah. Kanto, are you online?
Sorry. So you didn't have the English translation at all?
Okay, I think the gist of this, of course, is the value of information. I
Hello,
can only
Prof.
surmise from, yes, Kanto, are you able to summarize this in 2 sentences?
I think if Madame Nirluna can go on her last slide on the conclusion, maybe I can try to help on that one.
Oh, okay, Niri, can you share your screen again on the last slide, the conclusion?
This one?
Hi, Niri, did you hear me? If you can reshare your slides, just the last slide, the conclusions, just so that Kanto can just summarize for the benefit of some of us. Because the channels were switching on and off, and I lost sound completely there.
Let me check. I have to share the screen. Is that okay?
Thank you, Neri. Okay, Kanto, so if you can just maybe, give us the gist there, and then we can move on.
Okay, so on the conclusion, Madame Rahulia Zhao is saying that from the report that they've received on 2019 on the climate information and services associated from the amelioration of the result and advantage of agriculture and the food system from the multi-stakeholder. I think they had a meeting. There is capacity to take more decision from the perspective, from the role of meteorological role to enhance and to have a better decision on climate smart agriculture, on food system. And I think it's needed from there to have that inputs and data that she has been sharing, that it is needed to influence the decision on policies, on everything related to climate. And the meteorological services help to the decision to help the farmers. Oh, I think it's got it. To help irrigation, fertilizer, and to invest more on the livestock, on everything that is on the value chain to play the role around agriculture and food system. So I think it's more on taking into account how the important role of meteorology is in having resilient agriculture and food system. Yeah.
Thank you, Kanto. Thanks, Neri, for your patience. Thank you
You're
very
welcome,
much. I
but
think
I'm sorry.
yeah, that was, I think Kanto has helped us to do that. She's, of course, bilingual. It's part of the Fanapan Regional Secretariat. We're going to move on now. If James, if you can queue up, Neri, you can stop sharing so James can come on board. Of course, irrigation is one of the strategies that we have at our disposal to manage climate change. I heard a statistic from, was it from Markley, that talked about 90% of our agriculture production being rain-fed. And so we definitely need to do something about that, and irrigation is one way. So James, if you are ready, James is from the Australian National University. I know that is late in the day, or is it early morning for you? We really appreciate your diligence and dedication to this dialogue that you have stayed up this late. So over to you. Thank you.
Professor Sabanda, Professor Osho, and Dr. Talizzi, thank you so much for the invitation to participate in the dialogue. I'd like to share some...
Jeremy, you are muted, if you can unmute.
Muted, am I?
Okay,
no, Jeremy, I think you're fine.
Okay, sorry.
I'm fine? Okay, great.
It's all right, so, you can carry on.
Some lessons from a research for development project that I lead called Transforming Irrigation in Southern Africa. It's funded through the Australian Government's Centre for International Agricultural Research, but most importantly, the research on the ground is led by our research partners and African governments in Tanzania, Mozambique and Zimbabwe, and of course involves FANRAPAN. So in terms of climate smart agriculture, obviously dryland agriculture is particularly vulnerable to climate change, to seasonal change, to climate variability, and as you've seen in Southern Africa in recent years, to severe drought. And so one obvious option is to increase intensive agricultural production through irrigated agriculture. And indeed, most African governments have got very ambitious plans to increase irrigated agriculture, and that will be needed to feed African countries in coming years. However, when we look at the existing irrigation schemes, the government-owned smallholder schemes, the record is not good. So something like a third of the irrigation command areas are not producing. And of the irrigation areas that are producing, often the yields are little better than for dryland agriculture. So if irrigation is to be climate smart, we will need to work with irrigation farmers and governments to overcome these failures, to ensure that irrigated agriculture produces the food surpluses that one of the participants in the chat line suggested. So we've been working, are now working in over 38 irrigation schemes with 2 interventions. Now, what we're trying to do here is to address the problem of donors and governments building very expensive irrigation infrastructure, only to have it run down and collapse for a donor to come back and rebuild it. So what we've done is intervened with 2 very simple interventions that I'll outline. So one are some very simple to use tools that farmers, such as this farmer in Tanzania, can install in their fields to tell when enough water has been put on the field and then to stop watering. And that has some really radical outcomes. And of course, in a climate-constrained future, using water more efficiently is going to be really important. And we've seen this in the drought in Southern Africa, where a number of schemes where we have intervened, schemes that had limited water storage supplies in dams, have been able to continue irrigating despite the severe conditions. What these tools do is tell the farmers very simply whether their soils are saturated, as in blue, about right for optimal crop growth in green, or are too dry in red. And so with sensors at different levels in the soil, the farmers can tell whether the water is getting to the roots of their crop, but not getting in too deep and washing away the fertiliser. You can also use these tools to suck out a small amount of water and use a nitrate strip to tell whether there's fertiliser left in the soil, which is shown in the pink colours on this diagram. When we first started these schemes that we went to, the farmers who could access water had essentially drowned their crops and washed away the fertiliser, whereas those at the tail end of canals didn't have enough water to complete crops reliably. The second intervention that we've made is a social and institutional intervention. Sitting down with the farmers and asking them to envisage where they would like their farming community to be in 5 years' time, as shown by the drawing on the right, mapping where that scheme is at now on the left, and then inviting the farmers to think about how would they move their irrigation scheme from where they are now to where they would like to be in the future. We then help them prioritise how to overcome barriers or to seize opportunities that they can directly control by talking to other stakeholders in the production chain that Tembi outlined in her opening address. And so these are things like talking to input suppliers to jointly purchase inputs at a cheaper price, and to do things like talk to the ultimate buyers and find out what quality of crop the buyers want at what time, and to negotiate better prices. And so this intervention is known as an Agricultural Innovation Platform, or AIP. It's awful jargon, but what this AIP does is help the farmers network with different stakeholders. And so over time, the innovation platform becomes redundant because the farmers and the other people in the agricultural value chain interact with each other to their mutual benefit. So let me just quickly outline some of the results before leading to the lessons. So in the 5 original schemes, the percentage here relate to schemes between 50% and 93% of households changed their farming practices, and between 40 to 85% of the farmers reduced their irrigation frequency, reduced the amount of water they were putting on their fields, and this saved a lot of labour time each week for these farmers that they could use for other livelihood activities. The farmers said, more than half of the farmers said, that it was now easier for them to purchase inputs like improved seeds and fertilisers. And over 3/4 of all the farmers in these schemes increased their crop yields. But increasing crop yields isn't much good if you simply flood the market and lower the prices. What we found was that the farmers, through the innovation platforms, had improved their markets. And so this meant that more than 40% of all the farmers had actually increased their income because they had produced more crops and been able to sell it at a higher price with lower input costs. When we asked the farmers what they spent this extra income on, it was on more farming inputs to further intensify farming. It was on paying for their children's education, and it was on purchasing food. So the nutrition element of what we are talking about this afternoon, about helping people buy a more nutritious range of foods. There was a number of things that we should have thought of but didn't in terms of positive changes when we started this research. So what we found was that because the farmers at the head end of the canals who were taking too much water took less water and more of the water got to the tail end of the canals, all of the farmers in these schemes were able to grow reasonable crops. And because there was more income, this led to dramatic reductions in conflict. So over 40% of conflict in households was reduced as a result of these interventions. The reduction of conflict also meant that farmers in schemes were more willing to cooperate and to do things jointly, ranging from purchasing inputs to jointly maintaining scheme infrastructure. So more than 87% of farmers participated in maintaining the infrastructure, the canals, the headworks and so forth. We are hopeful that this will mean that rather than this very expensive irrigation infrastructure failing, now it will be maintained. We were worried that government officers would feel that these interventions would reduce their status. Actually, what happened is that more than 3/4 of the farmers decided that they needed more technical farming information because they were growing new crops and applying new agronomic practices. And so the government extension officers actually told us that their lives had improved because farmers wanted their help. There were also a number of benefits in terms of gender equity as a result of these changes. So what we think has happened is that underperforming small-scale government-owned irrigation schemes are transitioning from subsistence schemes that were not profitable and failed to schemes where the farmers are commercially oriented. And so this has come about because the soil monitoring tools have provided the farmers with the basic information they need to improve yield. And that by jointly evaluating where they want to go and how to get there with the innovation platforms, they've been able to use more information to make better decisions, to encourage governments to improve their policies. So, for example, to stop requiring the farmers to grow subsistence food crops when what the farmers need to do is grow profitable commercial crops. And so this has led to better engagements with markets and increased profitability. And so in this way, there's a positive feedback loop. So let me conclude with a few lessons, and my final slide will be some further information for those of you who would like that. So we need to think of irrigation schemes as a big contributor to climate smart agriculture, but they're very complex, and intervening only with investments in infrastructure will fail. We also need to invest in people, in institutions. By empowering the farmers with simple to use tools, it's generated great confidence in the farmers themselves to innovate further, to take ownership of these schemes and to make them profitable. The irrigation schemes cannot be maintained unless the farming system is profitable. So if governments dictate that the farmers grow maize, for example, the farmers will not make enough money to pay water fees for maintaining the infrastructure. Changing the farmers' approach to these schemes, helping them to undertake this as a commercial venture, has generated these positive feedbacks. And so in terms of the climate change adaptation benefits, more efficient water use has meant that farmers are able to farm longer during the droughts in southern Africa. It means that the farmers are using limited resources like land, water, their own labour and fertilisers far more efficiently. It's also meant that with the profits they've made, many of these farmers have developed an off-farm business like making bricks or a bakery, and that has diversified their incomes, not only improved their livelihoods, but given them a second source of income in those years where climate change reduces their crop yields. So I hope that this example, this case study of work that we've undertaken jointly with FANRAPAN and our African partners illustrates that there are ways to very rapidly improve climate resilience in farming. Here are some links to some further information for those of you who would be interested. I'll just leave this up for a few seconds, Professor Sibanda, and hand back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. That's, yeah, I think it's a real eye-opener there, because you think that when you hear irrigation, you're probably just thinking about increasing yield and making sure that your crops don't wilt. But here I see a good example of what Tembi was talking about earlier on, which is to do with the biophysical side, the behavior, the economic. I mean, on the behavior side, I'm seeing resolution of social conflicts, which you would not actually think that irrigation would have an ability to resolve. But I'm glad that this has worked. So that's a great example. And to some extent, answering some of Sunga's questions about sharing of risk. I mean, the innovation platform to me is a great tool there, which really is just about people saying, hey, we're part of this value chain. Let's sit down and discuss this. So thank you very much, Jamie. We really appreciate that. So we're going to move on. And the next question, of course, is, yes, great. We know that there's a lot of discussion going on about climate change and climate mitigation, particularly trying to reduce future, climate getting worse than it is right now, and if possible, even reverse some of the effects that we've seen. Looking at mitigation that is reducing or even preventing greenhouse gas emissions. And of course, agriculture is one of the sectors that's contributing quite a large chunk into the greenhouse gas emissions. And of course, everybody's saying, let's look at different ways through which agriculture can, or other ways of providing food, so that maybe we can shut down agriculture, but maybe that's not the solution. So we're going to hear from Akin Mwape, who is working for GRA, which is a New Zealand agri-research outfit, and they've been supporting issues of greenhouse gas emission in Africa and also globally. So Akim, if you are ready, please go ahead and share your thoughts on into the scheme of things as far as being resilient and building better food systems is concerned. Akim, please go ahead, Akim.
Hello, good afternoon and good morning, everyone.
Yeah, if you can speak up a bit, I think it's a bit low from my end.
I'm just trying to share my video, my presentation now. I don't know whether you are able to view it.
Yes, we can see it. We just
Oh,
need
good.
your voice to project a bit more.
Oh, thank you. Yes, let me just begin by thanking Dr. Shilizi, Professor Sedi, and Professor Sivanda for the invitation to speak at this very important dialogue. I am going to focus on greenhouse gas inventories as a foundation for building better and resilient agriculture systems. Let me just begin by just highlighting some of this information that Tembi presented when she just showed us some headlines from newspapers about what is happening in terms of agriculture in Africa. I'm just having a challenge here. I'm not able to move my slides. Sorry.
Just try use the arrows on your computer, the right one. If you want to move to the next.
No.
Kim, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
If you use your arrows on your keyboard.
Yes, I'm using the arrows, but I seem to be having a challenge, sorry.
Is it frozen?
Yeah, kind of.
Okay, let's maybe if you stop sharing, and then I'll try and see if we can load it from this end.
From that end, okay. What has happened?
If you exit from the share screen.
Okay. Oh, I can see it now.
Okay, but you are no longer sharing the screen. If you try again.
Okay, let me just try again. How about that? Are you able to see it now?
Yes, we can, but can you move it?
Yes, I think I'm able to move it now.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, just sorry about that. Just to continue where I was, I think some of the key issues that Tembi did allude to was the low productivity of the agriculture sector in Africa. And I just want to add on to this is that coupled with this low productivity, we've got high GHG emission intensities. And there is also high uncertainty regarding the African GHG budget. And part of the solution that has been proposed is improved agriculture GHG emission measurements and mitigation. Within the GRA, or the Global Research Alliance, we normally have a theme, and we normally like saying that you cannot mitigate what you can't measure. So an essential part of reducing emissions in agriculture is the building of robust national emission inventory systems, generating good quality local statistical information, and developing emission inventory methods that are able to recognize and capture emission reduction options. And national GHG inventories are a key component to that. Without this, we won't be able to understand the emissions, the removals, and the trends. We won't be able to develop effective mitigation policies and programs. We won't be able to monitor progress towards policy goals, or probably inform or develop climate smart mitigation and adaptation responses. So we need inventories, we need these information for natural resource management, climate change planning, and also economic development. Within the GRA, maybe just a word or two of what we are a network of governments that are interested in agriculture, GHG emissions, and their effects on climate change and food security. That slide is just showing a snapshot of what we are and our membership and what comprises or constitutes the GRA. You can see we are quite global with 64 member countries across the globe. And so, what are the key challenges that we have experienced from our experience that we have seen? The first significant one is the challenge of data. There are data gaps and significant challenges when it comes to the quantification of that information. In terms of livestock GHG emissions, for example, activity data is inadequate in many countries. Apart from that, there's also a scarcity or a paucity of capacities, capabilities, and also institutional constraints, such as poor data management, a lack of policy or legal frameworks, and a lack of quality control and quality assurance mechanisms. So some of the key questions that we should be asking ourselves when, as policymakers, when it comes to within the context of climate change and GHG emissions. I have two questions here that I've just posed. The first one relates to the methods and the data sources that are used in national GHG inventories. And the second one, I think, also relates to the transparency, the accuracy, and the completeness of the data that we are using. So in terms of the questions that we need to answer regarding GHG emissions, these questions are mostly hinged on the sources of data, the methods that we are using, and the quality of that information that we are using. Sorry, I have to rush through this presentation. So as a way forward, what is it that we should be focusing on? There should be a specific focus on activity data collection, sensitivity analysis, identification of data gaps and opportunities, including the exchange of experiences. A number of presenters before me have alluded to the fact that we need close cooperation between organizations, scientists, and policies. I want to add also that we equally need targeted capacity development at country level, which is going to enhance or fill the capacity needs that we do lack, especially in developing countries. So within the GRA, we have been working with developing countries and with FunPan to be specific, our interest has been to generate data that is going to inform our decisions, data that is going to inform our policies, and data that is going to inform our mitigation and policy options as regards to climate change and how we could address some of the challenges of food security that we are faced with. So we hope that by increasing understanding of the current available and collected in-country activity data on GHG emissions, we will be able to facilitate development of inventory systems and improvements across Africa and beyond. With those few words, let me just say thank you to FunPan for the opportunity to present at this forum. For further information regarding what we are doing within the GRA, please, you can just look at the address on the screen and contact us. Thank you very much, and thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Akim. I think for a lot of people, this is not a subject that is normally discussed, but we know that resilience is not just about maintaining productivity, maintaining yields. We also need to look at the carbon footprint of our food system. And resilience also includes mitigating, climate change and reducing carbon, basically greenhouse gas emission reduction, because that's part of resilience. Because if we focus on short-term gains, we obviously, it's not going to be good for the planet. And ultimately, we will pay the price as well. So thank you very much, Akim. We were going to move on and now look at the issue of post-harvest loss management. We know that we've had so many figures being thrown around that Africa loses anything from 30 to 50% of its harvest, particularly for perishable, products, but even non-perishable products. There's a lot of losses that happen either in the field, pre-harvest, but also post-harvest, whether it's at the farmer's homestead after harvesting, the issues of storage, the issue of processing. So all those things. So the question really is, if you are going to put so much resources into improving productivity, surely it makes a lot of sense to protect that harvest. So if you are losing 30 to 50% of it, maybe for me, it would mean that we really need to pay attention to the issue of losses, because we're basically hemorrhaging what we're producing. So to take us through that is Dr. Matthew Muma from KIPRA, which is the Kenya Institute of Policy Research and Analysis. So they're going to take us through the issue of post-harvest management. And just to remind presenters, we're actually running fairly behind schedule. So if you can save us time, I'll be very grateful. Over to you, Dr. Muma.
Thank you, Prof.
If you can share your screen and just carry on. Thank you. If you can just go to the slideshow mode.
Yeah, I was trying to do that, but I've sort of lost the.
If you go to the bottom
the
right of the screen, you can see that little screen just next to the minus sign. You click that.
Yeah, my whole screen. has disappeared. It has gone up as a strip on top of the laptop. I don't know what has happened. Oh God.
Mr. Matthew, maybe you
Share.
want to
Okay.
stop.
Okay. Let me try it again.
Okay.
Are you able to see it?
Yes, we are
Yes.
able to see it. If you can just go to the screen next to the minus sign. Remember the screen that we spoke about on the bottom right?
Mm. Oh, okay. Okay. All right.
That one. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Perfect.
Thanks a lot, Professor Sibanda.
Let's use your arrows on the keyboard to
Oh,
navigate.
okay.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, my name is Matthew Moore again. I want to thank FunPan for giving my institution this opportunity so that we can share our draft research with the FunPan. I'll talk about milk post-harvest loss in smallholder farms in Kenya. That will be the content of my presentation. Now, in Kenya, over 10 million people are in chronic food insecurity, and they have poor nutrition. And dairy production is important for food security because of the nutritive value of milk and dairy products as we know it. And then dairy also makes close to almost a half of smallholder incomes in Kenya. And you know, incomes can be translated into food and good nutrition. The total estimated annual milk production is about 5.5 billion liters or kilograms. And over 80% actually comes from the smallholder sector, and over 80% is actually marketed. Most of it comes from cattle, camels, and goats, which produce respectively 84, 12, and 4% of milk. Post-harvest losses in milk are substantial. It is about 95 million liters in the dairy value chain, including at the farm level, and the value is worth about 22 million US dollars. More losses occur since over 90% of the milk which is marketed is unprocessed. Now, the interventions which have been used to address post-harvest milk losses are in research, agricultural extension, in public-private partnership investments, let's say in post-harvest milk handling, storage and handling. Okay, the challenge has been, or challenges have been that actually up to now in Kenya, we only have a draft policy, which was actually initiated in 2015 and will still have to be translated into a parliamentary bill and into laws. Less than 10% of the marketed milk is processed. And the post-harvest estimates vary, let's say, between 5% to 10%. But recently, research from Egerton University in Kenya found that about 90% post-harvest losses are occur at the farm level. Now, the problem for the study is that without adequate information on the extent to which post-harvest loss occurs, there can be no realistic policy interventions to address food and nutrition security policy. So the objective was to simply estimate the post-harvest losses at the household level among smallholder dairy farmers and in pastoral herds, and also to infer from the findings the implications for policy. Now, the most important I want to say about literature review is that there is the framework for measuring post-harvest losses includes measuring spillage, physical spillage, spoilage, and then also measuring economic losses. There is this strip which is on the, I don't know how to get it out. It is actually even blocking me. Okay, now I use systems theory to do this research. This is where now the interactions between constitutive elements in the farm, including the self-regulating properties of biological systems, need to be taken into account. Now, the conceptual framework that can explain milk post-harvest losses at the farm level is that we have producing herds, such as the smallholder rural dairy, smallholder peri-urban dairy, and then pastoral, let's say camel or pastoral herds. They have feeding systems or feeding practices that apply to them. Then there are also milk handling practices, and there are also markets which apply to them. So for feeding practices, the types of feeds offered, quantity of feeds, and feed composition through milk yield and composition can influence post-harvest losses. About milk handling, it is mainly hygiene anyway, which will also affect post-harvest losses in terms of quantity, quality, and economic value, as I've already said. And then the market, then the market outlets can either encourage regular quality testing or irregular ones, which will eventually affect post-harvest milk losses. Okay, so the data was from a stratified random sample household, which was collected from 47 counties in the country. These are nationally and subnationally representative of agricultural, urban, and rural households. And the sample was having smallholder farmers with at least one unit of female dairy species. And then I used descriptive statistics for the analysis. Now, the proportion of women-headed households were just less than 30, and men households was just about 70, which was at about 10,641 household heads. So women households were slightly older, at about 50 years. Men households were 47. A man's household had one more additional member than a woman's household. Women were slightly better educated. And then the median age for the adults was 51 years, and then youth was 30 years. Adults had 5 members of the household on average, and then youth had 4. Actually, basically my results were indicating that it is better for me to use median statistic rather than mean, but I used mean just to demonstrate certain things because the data was skewed and also there were outliers. So it's reasonable to use actually median. So that is now the table for the statistics that I've just given about the demographics. For household livestock ownership, I found that household had exotic dairy had the lowest numbers of cattle owned by household compared to all other indigenous species during the 12 months before the survey. A man's household owned slightly more livestock numbers on average than did the woman's a year before the survey was done, except for dairy goats. And a man's household had one more unit of indigenous cattle and sheep than did a woman's. A woman's household had one more exotic sheep than did a man's. Youth household, however, differed from an adult's household, had only in owning one unit less each of indigenous cattle, dairy goats, and 1 more unit of exotic sheep. The median values for the numbers of the different livestock species showed actually no difference, basically. This is one of the tables I'm referring to. This is for the livestock numbers just during the survey, and then this other one is a year before the survey. Also analyzed the share of market for exotic dairy produce, in terms of gender and in terms of age categories. And we can see that the market share is mostly taken by neighbors. Most of the smallholders sell milk to their neighbors. The share makes over 50% of the milk that they sell. And then the milk traders also takes the next most highest share as a market for smallholder milk. That is for all those categories. That is the male and female gender, the adult and the youth. Okay, this one I had to analyze this because it has been found that the market for milk actually determines post-harvest losses. For example, the milk trader, there are a lot of milk losses through the milk trader channel. Okay. Okay, now coming to the actual post-harvest losses themselves. So the overall, the post-harvest loss for a household for the survey year was much lower than what actually is in literature, because like I've said, in literature, the percentage is between 5 to 10, and in some cases during wet seasons, it has been actually indicated that it could even be up to 50%. But what I found here is actually much less than even 0.5%. There were least post-harvest losses for indigenous cattle and dairy goat for a household which had the livestock a year before the survey. The highest milk post-harvest loss was for a household was from exotic dairy cattle, followed by that from indigenous goats for households that had those livestock. And then there was greater post-harvest loss for a male-headed household from exotic cattle, and relatively more losses from indigenous goats for a female-headed household. For the adult-headed household, those had relatively higher mean post-harvest loss for the exotic dairy cattle and indigenous goat than a youth household had. Youth had slightly greater post-harvest loss for the camel than adults. So overall, we are going to see the table, the format in which I presented has brought this problem. The overall
we need to be concluding now, Matthew.
Okay. So that is the table now for the post-harvest losses, and the value for post-harvest losses corroborate actually the actual physical post-harvest losses. So my discussion, I would say, is that the very low post-harvest losses which I found in this study for all livestock species is contrary to literature. It means that the Kenya National Bureau of Standards data used for this analysis most likely did not include all components of post-harvest losses of spillage, spoilage, economic value losses for milk. So the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics may not have used records for post-harvest losses data, or did not use methods for getting data accurately, such as assistance or farm memory. Maybe post-harvest losses, maybe post-harvest losses have reduced to the maximum over the years, but it does not look really credible. So the milk post-harvest results are too low and most likely not accurate, and the methods used for data collection for the post-harvest loss likely Okay, the milk post-harvest results are too low, most likely are not accurate. The methods used for collection for post-harvest losses most likely did not take into account components of the post-harvest loss. And recommendations, there is a need for further assessment for post-harvest loss comprehensively from a representative randomly satisfied sample to leverage development of relevant policy to address the food and nutrition security policy. Need to adopt post-harvest loss measurement framework. Then there is also need for smallholder milk records to be used as much as possible for data collection, and also or methods for assisting farmer memory to give accurate data or valid data on post-harvest losses. Post-harvest loss data should include corresponding production data, which was not from the KNBS data, to cross-check the validity of the losses. There may be need to adapt the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics data collection by incorporating technicians and carrying out data collection at multiple times over the seasons. And there may be a need for collaboration of the Kenya National Bureau of Standards and relevant technical institutions in the development of methods for post-harvest losses. There is also need, finally, for further research. There is need for policy research on how best post-harvest loss for smallholders who may not be having dairy records can be operationally done in the field in order to give credible data on milk post-harvest losses for smallholders and pastoral herds. That brings me to the end, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Matthew. Of course, normally we talk post-harvest losses. The tendency is to focus on crops. It's good that we heard from livestock for a change. And I think the point I noted here is that the issue of data is still running through as a major problem. And we heard the same from the greenhouse gas emission side. And also when we're talking about, in the opening remarks, biennial review report, data was still an issue. So data is a big issue for Africa. So thank you, Matthew. They say that you saved the best for last. The issues of markets are important as part of the resilience equation. So we're going to hear from Chimbala, Ms. Chimbala Yoyo from Oxfam, Southern Africa, who is going to talk about creating an enabling environment to transform agriculture markets for smallholder farming households. I hope that this will also provide some answers to our farmer friends. So Chimbala, if you can please go ahead. I don't know if you have a presentation or you're talking from notes or otherwise, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Simba. I have notes that I had gathered, that I had developed into a PowerPoint presentation. So I will share my screen just now. Can you see it? Okay.
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Thank
Just
you.
put it into a slideshow mode, then we are in business.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Fanapan, for inviting me to be part of the discussion, building better and resilient agriculture food systems. It is indeed an honor. Firstly, I would like to talk about what as Oxfam we do. Well, basically, in our approach to reduce poverty and create inclusion and justice, we work with a multiple range of actors to harness the power of movements and partnerships that we have, such as the one that we have with FANAPAN and like-minded institutions that have the potential as organizations to bring change into their context to achieve Oxfam goals, which are around social justice and equality for all. Over the past 2.5 years, Oxfam and FANAPAN have collaborated in efforts to create an enabling environment to transform agriculture and agricultural markets to accommodate and empower smallholder farmers. So one of our collaboration initiative, we have partnered to engage with government bodies, regional economic bodies as well, and research institutions to gather evidence that will inform policies, programs, and and socialize them to a community level. So our approach is threefold. Yeah. First, we gather evidence-based policies in our advocacy and influencing. We champion evidence-based policies so that governments and regional bodies are informed by what is pertaining on the ground, that they have empirical evidence, so that they can create an environment for smallholder farmers, as my previous participants had been speaking to, talking about climate smart technologies in the post-harvest, talking about irrigation. So it is just not enough, yeah, for smallholder farmers to develop climate smart technologies or to take up climate smart technologies, but the environment in which they're participating is very important, and it should be very enabling to support them to thrive, to support them to access competitive markets that will bring in sustainable income for them and their households. Okay, so these policies will then develop pro-poor programs, which will cushion and address the effects of climate change and economic disruptions. In addition, we will urge governments and decision makers to invest in rural infrastructure that will support these smallholder farmers to participate and access these markets, as well as invest in services and information that will help farmers have more power and bargaining power for them to access markets. Okay. So the big question is, how is climate change affecting agriculture markets? Yeah, so the obvious answer is, of course, low quantities and qualities of goods to meet market demand. So one of the challenges that smallholder farmers face is that their produce do not meet the standard and the quality that our consumers demand for them to fetch a higher price. When you look at the devastations that has happened in the past years in terms of climate change, we've had the cyclone Idai and the Kenneth that had hit Southern Africa. And in Malawi, about 91,000 hectares of farmland was affected by this cyclone. And in Mozambique, we have an astounding number of about 700,000 hectares was affected. This is farming land, and it affects the quantity that smallholder farmers produce. And therefore, when they're able to move their goods, they have to aggregate these low quantities amongst themselves for them to access markets. And the second climate change, issue that we're facing is the current COVID-19. So governments alike have enacted COVID-19 restrictions that people should adhere to. And this has adversely affected our smallholder farmers in them accessing markets, because it has limited the movement of people, movement of goods, their goods, but then also inputs for their productivity. So the limited movement has restricted the use of farm labor during critical times such as planting and harvesting. Some markets in the region have been closed. An example is Mkisa in Zimbabwe. These markets closed because they're overcrowded, and therefore smallholder farmers cannot sell their produce to make a living. Then the third item that markets have been affected by climate change is the high prices of input supplies and access to finance. As we all know, smallholder farmers are dubbed as high risk in terms of them accessing finance or credits. In Zambia, the current interest rate for them to borrow is about 21 to 28%. The fourth one is inconsistent government policies. This has been a conversation that has been ongoing, and most of these agriculture policies are political and very inconsistent. For smallholder farmers to thrive in markets, they need a stable and predictable market policy. I'll give an example on export bans in Zambia, which are very unpredictable. Currently, there's a ban that prohibits smallholder farmers to export maize, and therefore they are forced to take the price that has already been set by the Zambian government, and they are not able to export at a competitive price. The fourth issue that markets are being affected in terms of climate change, the fifth one, is climate change disasters have further reduced government and private sector investment in agriculture. Of course, because of the pandemic, the priority in terms of funds has been skewed and shifted to the health sector. So what can be done? So as Oxfam, these are the following recommendations that we make in terms of responding to climate change and how they affect markets. So the first one is government should put in measures that ensure smallholder farmers, agro enterprises access financial rescue packages that are made available to cushion the business. As Oxfam, a number of our country offices have been giving out social cash transfers, and also we have designed business models that are tailor-made to rural farmers who are in need. Then the second one is finances should restructure agricultural loans, because the current structure of agricultural loans are more beneficial to commercial farmers, while smallholder farmers are on the lower receiving end. Then the third recommendation is collaborating closely in ensuring that mobile technologies are used to provide extension services to farmers for pest and disease surveillance. The second last one is to strengthen ICT information on market prices and electronic financial transaction that will virtually connect smallholder farmers to consumers without risking them exposure and while meeting consumer needs. And last but not the least, government and development partners should urgently identify poor and marginalized farmers affected by COVID-19 disruptions to provide them with input subsidies such as livestock and seed fertilizer to lower their cost of production, because currently the inputs of prices has skyrocketed. So that's the end of my presentation. For more information, you can visit our website, or you can kindly send me an email and I'll respond to your queries.
Thank you, Chimbalas, for that. Obviously, markets are part of the equation. Remember, we talked about an economic balance as part of the resilience. So the biophysical, the behavior, social side, and of course the economic side, where the markets play a big part. So that's the end of our panelists, and basically responding to the climate resilience of food systems and different aspects, some bringing the issue of COVID, which is still with us. So we just want to applaud you, all the speakers, Chimbala and the other 5 colleagues. The way we had planned this was that we would have a question and answer. For those that may have the program, this was meant to be 40 minutes, which unfortunately we don't have anymore. So, and I've also checked on the chat that we don't seem to have had many questions, or there were a few comments, and some of them were responded to by the panelists. So I think what I'm going to try and do is really just to do a quick reflection, and then I'll advise you on how we proceed, especially on tomorrow's activities. It's not an easy thing to summarize, you know, something like what, 8 or so, 10 speakers, but starting all the way from our opening session, the issues of Africa's performance in agriculture and food systems. We know that Africa is committed to a peer review process through the Malabo commitment and the biennial peer review. We're definitely not doing well on that front. Some of it could be artifacts of data, but there is also poor performance in general. So we definitely need to get our act together. And of course, the new challenge of COVID. The chair talked about this as a challenge, but also as an opportunity for us to press the pause button and come up with solutions that would deliver, not just on resilience, whichever way we define it, but also in terms of ensuring a prosperous Africa, which is well-nourished, food and nutrition security issues, critical. So we have a number of, I think I can go on challenges, but really the issue here is to come back, I think, to the issue that Tembi raised, and the 3 things that she put across to us, that the solutions are not just biophysical. I know that for a long time, our biophysical colleagues focused on increasing production, increasing productivity. Later on, we got the value chain players coming in to promote markets and put more money into farmers' pockets. But we have not done as much on the behavioral side, the social side of this whole equation. The fact that the people are part of the problem, but they are also the major part of the solution. The social side also needs to be tackled if we're going to have a resilient and better agriculture and food systems. Mr. Sunga, I hear you. I feel for you. You talked about the fact that we expect farmers to carry the burden. You talked about risk sharing, and fortunately, there's still some solutions out there. Some of them not too expensive, and a lot of these lie within the behavioral and social engineering side of things. The things that we can do as humans to have an equitable share, not only of the problems, but also of the benefits that come out of agriculture. So we don't want to leave the burdens to the farmers. And when it comes to profits and benefits, everybody jumps in, and the farmers are, in most cases, left, holding very little for their efforts. So it's important that whatever solutions we come up with address those particular issues. I was happy to see that the irrigation solution actually addressed some of these things. You'd think that irrigation was just all about water, but we see that there are issues to do with managing soil fertility, time management, and then you move on from that, you superimpose the innovation platforms, people get to talk to each other, and guess what? You have solutions there. And I was so happy to see that even gender conflicts actually are reduced at the household level. Who would have thought that irrigation would actually, do that sort of thing? And I can imagine that that could also happen with other innovations that we can come up with. The fact that you get people to sit down and talk, and they normally would bring out solutions that, would take us far. And of course, the issue of policies. The policies need to be informed by evidence, and we continue to see that our evidence is based on very shaky, data. So we still need to perfect our data systems. Essentially, what we need is a system that makes data collection of any kind in the food system routine, so that we're not doing it on a project basis. So it's something that our public institutions are collecting routinely. And so it means that we need to invest in those data systems, to invest in quality control, and make sure that the data that we're using to formulate policies is accurate and delivers. Otherwise, if we're going to make policies on wrong premises, then of course we are not going to get very far. So this is, yeah, these are the issues that are coming out. The same thing came out from Akim's presentation. It was about data on greenhouse gas emission inventories, the fact that, especially from agriculture, for a long time, we have looked at the issue of greenhouse gas emission has been managed by ministries of environment and climate change, and yet the solution and the problem and solution lies with agriculture practitioners. So fortunately now we're seeing a lot of countries realizing this and bringing on board the agriculture actors to make sure that they understand the implications of their system. The food that they're producing is not just about the cost of how much you are paying to buy inputs, to pay labor, but it's also the cost to the environment, which is usually paid by everyone and not just the person that is practicing agriculture. So that is the totality of the cost of the food system that we need to take into account. But unless we measure it, there's no way we're going to mitigate. So that's critical. And then the same thing, we see the same thing coming through from the losses from the dairy sector in Kenya, that yeah, one would have been very happy to say the losses are much lower than what the literature said if we were confident about that data. But the presenter actually puts a lot of question marks on the accuracy of that data. So we're still stuck in that place. Similarly, Chimbala, when you're talking about marketing and the policies, poor programs, which need to be informed by evidence. And that evidence still remains a big challenge. So for me, from today, yes, we're talking climate change, we're talking resilient and better food systems, but unless we can get our handle on the data, among other things, the rest of the policies and everything else we would want to push forward, they are not going to work very well because we have no way of assessing where we are. But what we know is that a lot of people are still hungry out there, and things are actually projected to get worse. And especially with climate change, the sub-Saharan region is one of those regions in the world which are expected to get drier over time. So the challenges can only be greater. So we've got our work cut out for us. And we really need to rise up to the occasion and deliver on not just one front. On biophysical fronts, we need to deliver on supporting our various actors and stakeholders in how to manage these, the social issues, the behavioral issues, but also the impact, ultimately, the economic side needs to be managed. So we need everybody to get together, our governments, the private sector, civil society, and of course the practitioners who are supporting these systems need to rise to the occasion. So that essentially is what we're taking home tonight, to remember that we can't talk resilience unless we look at the total picture and commit resources, efforts to resolving those issues. So as far as tomorrow's program is concerned, so today was talking about climate smart agriculture, climate change in the resilience issue. But of course, it's important that we talk about the food and nutrition security side of things, because indeed that is one of the major roles of agriculture, to make sure that populations are well nourished. So tomorrow's sessions are going to be focusing on food systems, food security, and how we can transform those in order to end up with a better and more resilient agriculture and food system. So please join us again tomorrow. And I don't know if there are any housekeeping issues. The support team, if anyone wants to come on board and just share some information. And yeah, we hope that also that the translation, this is something we're going to work on, and tomorrow we hope that you have a better experience. Colleagues, do we have any housekeeping issues that we may want to share with colleagues before we finish today's session?
Nothing from our side, thank you.
Okay. Otherwise, what's left for me is to say thank you very much to the presenters and all the panelists for a job well done. The papers from these today's sessions will be shared. They will also be summarized in the proceedings. I got a request from the support team that for those that are still online, if you can go to your videos and activate those. We want to take a group photo if you like, a virtual one. I hope it works. Can you activate your videos so we can see your faces and just have the mosaic of the various participants online? Please do that. Thank you. Can we have some more? I don't know why Francis is taking the whole screen.
Mine is blocked. I'm trying to open and I'm being told that the host has stopped it.
The host needs to release the pictures.
Okay, can we,
the host is,
the support side, can we have, can you release the videos from everybody so they can show their faces? We're still waiting. Happiness, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. They just need to turn on their cameras, their videos.
Okay,
So
can you,
as long as,
can you,
sorry,
so
just saying,
just
as long
need
as
to
they
switch
can
on their
turn on their
videos?
mics, they can turn on their cameras. So if they can just turn on the camera up there by video, and then they should be able to come back on screen.
Okay, so please turn on your camera or your video. If you can do that, we should be able to see you.
Mine is not okay.
Doesn't seem to be happening. I'm not sure why.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to turn on your camera now. Okay, if is anyone struggling with their camera? Okay.
Seems to
I see a lot of people. Sorry? Okay, so I think we can take the screenshot now.
Cheese.
Yeah, it's only the one team. Okay, are we okay on the photographers? We don't seem to manage to get everybody on here for some reason.
It looks like everyone is here except for the translator. I don't know if maybe she's struggling, but it looks like everyone's camera is on. Mr. McClay, I've asked you to, there we go. Mr. McClay is here. It looks like everyone who was on the panelists is on screen.
Only the panelists?
Yes.
Okay, so we can't have the audience, so it's just the panelists. I'm not sure why I'm only seeing 5 people here.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. So this brings us to the end of our session for today. So we see you tomorrow. And if you can try and log in, I don't know whether it's possible to allow people to come in earlier, because we spent quite a bit of time waiting for people to get on board. But maybe that's something we'll discuss later on. Thank you so much. Have yourselves a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Okay. Let's see.
Seems like.
Hi, Kento, can you hear us?
Can we